and there's not this big, my next guest is, you know what I mean? So
All right, Mr. Letterman, no problem. My next guest is.
So where I wanted to start, Alan, in I want to start from the beginning here. I'm an avid photographer, and I love taking videos and going on trips and expeditions. And you know, like or hate social media, you know, I'm reminded daily of the memories that I have with my friends. And you know, I got one a couple of days ago, and Facebook shared, you know, today is a memory of, and it was me and my friend Erica, and it was right near the clock tower near the Grand Canyon, and we were having sunset beers, and we were dropping in the next morning to do the rim to rim hike. And you know, something like that was 7 years ago, but to me it's special because we forget. And when I do see stuff like that, it's like, oh my god, this is my adventure buddy, and we're still doing adventures. And it just it's so much more meaningful to me as we get older. So I wanted to start because I found you initially, and I was drawn to you on your YouTube post 13 years ago about memories are everything.
Yeah.
And it was only a minute and a half video about your initiative to climb the 7 summits. You're raising $1 million for Alzheimer's awareness. And it just really hit me through the heart. And I just wanted to open this conversation around what that means to you. Memories are everything, and we can kind of drop in from there.
Wow, you reached right inside my chest and touched my heart. Yeah, memories are everything. I was in a Perkins restaurant in Memphis, Tennessee in 2006. And I was sitting across the table from my mom. And my dad was in the hospital down the street in the intensive care unit. And he was dying. He had congestive heart failure and kidney disease. And I'd come home to check on him. But when I got into the house, I realized that there was something horribly wrong in the house that I was raised in. I was taken from the hospital and raised in Memphis. And so at that Perkins restaurant, in the middle of the meal, I was telling Mom that, hey, Dad may not make it this time. And she said, yeah, he might. I thought, well, that's an odd response. And I said, well, he's in really bad shape. Oh yeah, he's been in bad shape before. He'll be fine. I said, no, Mom, you need to prepare ourselves. And she took a sip of coffee, and she always liked her coffee really hot, and the steam came up and steamed up her glasses. And she kind of giggled about that. And then she put her cup down, and then she kind of cocked her head a little bit, Brian. And she looked at me, and she had just absolutely perfect clarity in her eyes. And she said, now, who are you again? Memories are everything. Ended up that Mom, Ida, had Alzheimer's. And she had been diagnosed with it several years earlier, but her and my dad had hidden it from my brother and I. I think their motive was that they cherished their independence, and they didn't want to be forced to go live in a memory center, assisted living, nursing home. And so they lived this life, and they were happy. But I could, as the years progressed, after my dad died, I would go and spend time with my mom and ask her about, hey, Mom, tell me about, where'd you go to high school? Oh, yeah, that was in Crowley, Kentucky. That was in Clinton, Kentucky. And, and Beth and Mary and Mabel, they were my team. They were my classmates. Hey, Mom, what'd you guys have for dinner last night? Well, I don't know. That's not important. And it ends up that Alzheimer's is a disease that it does eventually destroy the brain, and it destroys memories. But in the early parts of it, the mid phases, you stop creating memories. And that's the reason that she could remember her classmates, but she couldn't remember what she had for dinner last night. And it occurred to me that just like the story you just told me about that memory that popped up on Facebook and how it evoked these positive feelings in you, that we live our lives making memories. And later in life, those memories often become all we have left because we can no longer do what we once did. You know, I'm now 66 years old. I'm never going to climb another 8,000 meter mountain in my life, and I'm okay with that. But the memories I have of being on Shishapangma, Broad Peak, Choyu, summiting Everest, summiting K2, those are the memories that I will have forever, and I hope I'll never lose them. But I might. So memories are everything.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Wow. What initially drew you in to mountaineering?
You know, I have to, I'm afraid every question you're going to ask me, I'm going to start it with talking about my parents because, you know, look, I've had a fantastic life. If all of a sudden you snapped your fingers and I was gone, I'd have almost no regrets. I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee by a couple of middle-class people that never graduated high school. My dad was a administrator for a nursing home, ironically. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until I reached 10 years old. My brother reached 12, and she went back to work in the personnel department, which is called HR today at Sears Roebuck. And every summer on Father's Day, Dad would load up the 1963 brown Chevrolet Impala, by the way, with no air conditioning. And we would go on a road trip. Most of the time we went down to Florida, but one year we came here to Colorado, came to Estes Park, and we went to a dude ranch. And we were having barbecue. It was all greasy, you know, run all over your face. It was fantastic. But from the dude ranch, I could look up and I could see Long's Peak. And somehow or another, that was the seed that got planted. Now, it was dormant for a long time because I went to college, graduated with a degree in electrical engineering, which I never used. I am not an engineer. Hello, my name is Alan. I'm not an engineer. And I went to work for Hewlett-Packard, became a workaholic, just absolutely focused on my career. I ended up coming to live here in Colorado with HP. Did a couple of Colorado 14,000 foot mountains, AKA 14ers. And then I got a chance to go live in Europe and ended up in Geneva, Switzerland with HP. And I took a guided climb of Mont Blanc. And then I did a trek to Everest Base Camp. And the die was cast. The seed began to germinate and it grew into this massive tree. So I kind of call my life in phases, kind of like software. You know, there was Alan 1.0, which was the workaholic, Alan 2.0, which was the climaholic, and now I'm in Alan 3.0. And I got to figure out what the holic is, but it has nothing to do with work or climbing anymore. Actually, it does. But
Yeah, amazing. And I just want to preface, you've climbed all 7 summits in 11 months after that short 1.5 minute video. Memories are everything. And it's just incredible to me because I've done one with Kilimanjaro and you're my coach, and I attempted Aconcagua this year, and you know, I tell you, I mean, there's so many metaphors in life and the mountain that I love, and I believe it to be true. And can you just talk a little bit about that experience in 11 months, doing those 7 summits, what that was like, what like that's just incredible to me.
yeah, so Brian, when we first met and started talking about you doing Aconcagua, I asked you, what's your why? So, Brian, what is your why? And we talked a lot about that. And with my consulting business, Summit Coach, I do this with every single person. That takes up the majority of our first call. And I love hearing what people's whys are, because there's no right or wrong answer. Everybody's why is unique to them. My why for the 7 summits was that after Ida died in 2009, I had made a vow to her that I was not going to let her death become another number on a long list of people killed by Alzheimer's. And I was going to honor her, and I was going to do my best to raise awareness and money for research to find a cure for this disease, because it's one of the few diseases that we have no way of slowing it down, reversing it, stopping it, preventing it. Once you get it, it's 100% fatal. And I know that what my brother and I went through in our family, I don't want any other family to go through this. And it's been now, it's been 15 years. We've made a lot of progress, and I'm very pleased with the progress, but we still don't have a way to address it. So I already had a pretty good climbing resume. I sucked at climbing. I didn't make hardly any of the mountains that I tried, mainly because my why was off center. I don't even know if I had a why. If I did have a why, it had to do with selfishness. And I began to think about that vow I made to my mom and how I could honor her. So by this time in 2009-10, I had the website that had about 1 million people following it. I had a brand. I had a pretty good credibility out there in the community. And mountaineering was something I loved. I mean, it was my passion. I absolutely loved it. And so I had a platform, I had a voice, and now I had a message. And I wanted to take that message to the world by doing something that most 52, 53-year-olds would never even dream of. So I was incredibly fortunate and have eternal gratitude to Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer for sponsoring me, because it was expensive, as you well know, to climb all 8 of the 7 summits, which is a whole other story. And so I was in New York at a marketing firm called B2B, which specializes in pharmaceutical marketing, because there's a whole bunch of rules around the FDA and other things. And so this lady, Stephanie Budnick, we're talking, and right in the middle of it, she said, "Hey, what if Alan climbed all of them in 1 year?" And I'm like, "What? You're crazy." And I got to thinking about it. I said, "You know what? That's brilliant." Because I would be able to do back to back. Once I got in shape, I probably wouldn't get out of shape. I'd be literally, and we talk about being in Aconcagua shape or Everest shape. I'd be in the best shape of my life, which is way beyond the best physical shape of my life. I'd be prepared mentally, emotionally, physically, everything. And so, I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So I trained like crazy that year before here in Colorado with my good friend, my best friend, Jim Davidson, up in the Rocky Mountains here. And we did everything. I think I climbed something like 15 or 20 14ers that summer. And so December 9th, 2010, I summited Vinson. And then I did Aconcagua in January. Then got Everest in May 21st, 2011. By the way, you said a memory came up. Somebody reminded me that 2 days ago was my anniversary, and I completely forgotten it.
Well, now you remembered.
Yeah, really. Then I went to Denali, and I got skunked on Denali. This was my 3rd time to go there, and weather got me. We spent 8 days and 40 nights at the high camp at 17,000 feet. And it was Groundhog Day. Every day there was a lenticular. We never were able to get up there. So then after that, I went and did Elbrus in Russia, and then Kilimanjaro, then down to Carson's Pyramid, and then Kosciuszko. I think I got them all. And the last one was like in September. So I was gone for something like 280 days out of 320. So it was fantastic. It was just one adventure after another. And I'm just so grateful that this kid from Memphis, Tennessee, elevation 337 feet, could even have that opportunity, much less, be able to summit almost all of them. So I got 7 out of the 7 summits.
And it didn't stop there. You went on to climb 8,000 meter peaks. I looked at your list on the website. I don't think you gotten all 14
No.
8,000-meter peaks, but you did quite a bit of the 8,000-meter peaks as well.
Yeah, I attempted Shishapangma and Broad Peak. Broad was my first. No, I think Broad was my first 8,000er. That and Shishapangma didn't. The only true summits I've reached are K2 and Everest, which is not bad. But I've made a good showing on Broad Peak, Shishapangma. Choyo was actually my first one in 1999. And then I attempted Lhotse twice. One year was 2015 when the earthquake hit. And then the next year I went back, and it was my own, inadequacies, which kept me from going up and summiting that one. Everest 3 times, and then summited on the 4th. So yeah, I think I always had to go back and add them all up. It's something like 12 or 13 experiences on 8,000-meter mountains.
Incredible.
I love it. Just love it.
Incredible. I want to back up a little bit to the companies that sponsored you, and you talked about your why. And if your why is not great enough, you're not going to summit these peaks. That's just plain and simple.
Yeah.
So your why was great enough to where you actually caught the eyes of some big sponsors, and that's very difficult to have sponsors, sponsor your full trip to Everest. So definitely shout out to Johnson and Johnson, and then also the two organizations in your video, the Cure Alzheimer's Fund and the National Caregiver Alliance. Those two organizations, are those at the forefront of Alzheimer awareness still to this day?
Yeah, I mean there's several that I would consider to be just doing yeoman's work. The Alzheimer's Association, they're the 800-pound gorilla out there. They're clearly the largest, and they have a lot of they do the most private funded research of any nonprofit. Then there's Us Against Alzheimer's, which is a very effective organization in helping to drive public policy, and they've been responsible for helping to increase the funding through the National Institutes of Health from around 500 million to close to 3 billion now. And then the Cure Alzheimer's Fund is the one that I've worked with since 2008. And the reason I just admire them so much is because 100% of any donations they receive goes directly to research. And they're responsible for doing some of the most groundbreaking research breakthroughs thus far. So, for example, they pioneered being able to create Alzheimer's brain cells with Alzheimer's disease in a petri dish in the lab, so that then they can test drugs on this in the petri dish in the lab rather than having to do human clinical trials. And that is an amazing breakthrough. So that shortened the ability to test new drugs and treatments that from years to literally months. So in the National Family Caregiver Alliance, they're really at the forefront of helping to support caregivers. And I call caregivers the silent victims, because often people, they have to give up their jobs. Sometimes they have to give up their homes in order to keep their loved one at home. And it's just caregivers are just amazing of what they do to take care of their loved ones.
Great. Getting a little. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just trying to eliminate the reverb here.
Yeah, you went blank on the main feed.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can see you on your phone, but not on the main feed.
I lost the video on the main. I think the video died out. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I never lost your audio.
Okay. Yeah, we'll keep going with this. Bear with me here. So now that you have done all the 7 summits, and the name of the show is After the Peaks.
Yeah.
And to me, After the Peaks means, you've already gone through the hard stuff. You've already summited all the peaks. You've already conquered. And what is your mission now going forward? What's your messaging now? And has it changed from when you climbed that seventh summit and you were unstoppable at that point? Like, how have things changed since then with your messaging?
Um, I've learned a lot, and I have grown a lot and evolved a lot. Mountains have a way of stripping away any pretense that you have about who you think you are. It causes you to realize what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your opportunities. It gives you the opportunity to hone skills in a real time, real world environment. As I said earlier, Alan 1.0 was about work, 2 was about climbing, and I think Alan 3.0 is about giving back. Again, I have just been phenomenally uh, just blessed, if you will, to have the life that I've had, to have a 30-year career with a good company, great company, Hewlett Packard, HP. To have the relationships I've had in my life, to have people that have supported me as I've gone through these journeys, and then to go off and have these adventures. And I think that at some point we have an obligation. I always say we have an obligation that when a window opens up in our life, that we have an obligation to jump through it. Even if it means we fall on our face, we still have the obligation to jump through that window to see what that experience is going to bring us. And that's the way I've always viewed my mountaineering. And now that I'm beyond the mountaineering phase in my life, for a lot of different reasons. And not that, I still have the burning desire. The mind is willing, but the body's not. So I think that I have this accumulated knowledge and this body of experience that is very valuable to help other people accomplish their dreams. And so that's what I'm doing with Summit Coach. I also am doing public speaking, where I go and talk to audiences using mountaineering as a metaphor, but whatever my host is, the messages for their meeting, whether it's teamwork or positivity, or pushing against barriers or resilience, whatever it is, that I can weave those themes into my mountaineering experiences and talk about that from a first person experience. And then of course I still enjoy the writing and the covering. I'm doing covering for Outside Magazine this year. Once again, Everest. I think I've done it now for the last 10 years. And of course, my blog, writing about that. So, I jokingly say I need to go get a real job so I can quit working so hard, because I'm just constantly doing things. But the big picture is that I really want to give back. I want to give back as a way of showing gratitude for the life that I have, the experience that I've had, and the relationships that I've had.
Amazing. Yeah, and you are creating an impact. That's just how I feel, and I see how you show up in the mountaineering community. I see the impact that you're creating with your updates with Everest and what's happening out there now with rescues, with unfortunate deaths,
Yeah.
even thievery. You talk about at the high camps, where we don't even think about, we're spending all this money to go on these expeditions, and there's gear that's going missing at the higher camps. So your advocacy for this community is just unrivaled, unparalleled. I just want to say thank you, because I see you do that, and I see you do that with you just have such an open heart with this. And so I'm just mirroring what you're saying.
So I appreciate that, Brian. Very kind. Thank you.
Yeah. And just backing up to mountains as a metaphor for life, there's so many in business and life that I see. And I had a couple of questions regarding that. And, everything is from reflection, right? Like, I can't talk about Aconcagua in theory. I can only talk about when I'm at 21,000 feet and I look to my right and I see an Indian man who has frostbite or can't hear through his left ear, or someone who got frostbite in their foot, or high altitude, edema, like fill in the blank. You can't really theorize mountaineering until you get out there, right?
Right.
So when I am out there, um, to you, how important is mindset on an expedition, and where has negativity perhaps sabotaged an expedition?
Great topic, great question, great framing of it. Often you'll hear people say that climbing is 90% mental and 10% physical. I agree with that with a huge caveat, and that is assuming you have the basic level of fitness that allows you to go climb a mountain. I don't care how much you want it, how badly you want it. If your body won't acclimatize, your body won't perform at altitude, and you can't put one foot in front of the other, there's no such thing as short roping and pulling somebody up a mountain. That's a myth made up by the people that love to hate mountaineering. So I think having a positive mindset, though, is the difference between making it and not making it. I'm Brian. I know that we talked in the first time. I talked to a lot of people about this. I go back to the why, and the why. The reason the why is so important is because just like in running a marathon, at mile 23 you hit the wall. When you're on a big mountain like an Aconcagua, Denali, even a Rainier, much less a big mountain, an 8,000 meter mountain, you will hit the wall. At some point, you're going to be questioning why you are there and what you're doing. And it's just so easy to turn around and go back home and just say, well, it wasn't my day, or the mountain conditions weren't good, or the guide was terrible, they pushed me too much, or the food was, there's a long laundry list of excuses. And on my first 3 attempts on Everest, I got up to what I call affectionately my big favorite rock. And you can substitute whatever F word you want to for favorite. But it's right below the balcony, and it's around 27,800 feet. So it's between Camp 4, which is the South Col, and the balcony, which is where you typically change out supplemental oxygen bottles. And then you go on up to the South Summit and then to the summit. Well, I got to the same spot all 3 times, and I turned myself around. Nobody turned me around, no Sherpa, no guide. I said, for a lot of different reasons, I could go through all 3 of them, but for different reasons, I turned myself around. And when I finally did summit, I got to that same spot where I turned around the three previous times in half the time. It took me 6 hours before. It took me 3 hours on my 2011 summit. And I think the big reason was that I focused on the bigger picture. I focused on the why I could do this instead of the 1,000 reasons of why I couldn't do it. I like to say that there's 1,000 reasons why you say no, but there's only one reason that you keep going. And I try to help when I do my speaking. I always try to emphasize this point, is that know what your why is in life. Know why you do what you do. And it doesn't matter what you do, but know why you do it. And then do it with passion and do it with commitment. And don't focus on all the reasons why you can't do it. Focus on the reasons why you can do it. I'm a firm believer in that we get back what we put out. If we put out negativity, we will attract negativity. Similarly, we put out positivity, we will have positivity returned to us, and that will make our life richer, and the people around us, it'll make their lives richer as well. So how did that mindset impact my climbing? As I said a few moments ago, I sucked when I first started climbing because, as you know from your Aconcagua experience, you suffer. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. Don't. If someone tells you, "Oh, it was a cakewalk, I didn't hurt at all," they're probably not being totally transparent, because everybody suffers on these climbs, and we often suffer in whatever physical endeavor, and often the mental endeavor, or even relationships. And so we have to accept that suffering as part of the journey, and we have to learn from it. And I think what I learned from those 3 turnarounds on Everest was that I had the willingness, that I had the capacity, and it really shined its light on K2 when I had developed pulmonary edema. And I was there again raising money for Alzheimer's and to honor Ida. And it never occurred to me to turn around as I was developing HAPE, high altitude pulmonary edema, where the lungs fill up with fluids. All I thought about was getting to the top or sitting down and dying. I know it's totally irrational. And people will say, well, Alan, you were suffering from altitude sickness. Alan, you were delusional. Alan, you were crazy. Yeah, all the above. But all I know is that I was going to do what I needed to do in that moment. And that's another thing about climbing, is that you're strictly in the moment, very zen. You don't think about yesterday. You don't think about tomorrow. Very similar to what I dealt with Ida. She was totally in the moment in their final years of Alzheimer's. And there was a sense of peace and bliss about that. Same thing with mountain climbing. You're in the moment. And so I was not in the moment on my first 3 attempts on Everest, but I was in the moment on the time that I made it. And I was in the moment the time I made K2. And that's a life lesson that I've taken with me forever and I use to this day. And it's really hard to do, easier to say. It can be a bumper sticker, but I think it's also an axiom for life, is that live in the moment and be the best you can be in that moment. And I think I just stole some slogans from Nike. I'm not sure, but nonetheless.
Beautiful. I just think about my Aconcagua trip and how incredible it was. And we were doing a day hike at Benetti Peak at about 15,500 at Plaza del Mulas, and the main base camp in Aconcagua, which is the second to largest base camp outside of Everest. And that's when we got word from, I think it was Independence Point, right where you start to go around that bend, where it's just very exposed. And I think it was a Canadian man who fell 300 meters and I think later got both his legs amputated. And we were receiving that feedback at base camp. And this is before we're going up to the higher camps. So that was on my mind.
Yeah.
And that was infiltrating my mind.
Yeah.
And then we got up to Camp 1. And mind you, there was 2 other people in my expedition that could not continue. One had to get airlifted off because he fell down some scree on Benetti Peak, and another gentleman was just not fit. And when we got to Camp 2, there was a group in a yurt that was waiting for a weather window, and they were in there for 2 days. And it was like the movie Everest. Like there was multiple expeditions all going for a weather window. I didn't really understand what was happening until you get to the higher camps. You can't even understand like what is happening, right? To where you have this spaciousness of going through the Hurricane Valley, and it's just like hiking forever. And it's just like your foundational training, it's not really kicking in at that point. Like that Bible of mountaineering book that you got me, where we talk about long foundational training, right? And why this is so important, and compounding, whether you're saving money in a bank or training for a triathlon or summiting Everest, there has to be compounding. And it's boring, right? There's nothing exciting about doing day hikes, prepping for an expedition, or getting on the treadmill every single day. And you don't see the daily progressions really until you are at that wall, right? And when we got to Camp 3, the whole dynamic of this expedition changed. We had another expedition meet up with us, and it was like go time. Right. So when we got to 21,000 feet, it was like, that was the summit, in my opinion. But that's where everyone put their helmets on. That's where I saw just the whole temperament of everybody around me. Like things were changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
People were really messed up. You can muscle your way through Aconcagua, but you're not muscling through from Camp 1 on. I don't care what you say. I mean, things are drastically going to change. So to me, it just didn't become fun. I was very lethargic. I was slowing down, and my guide was demanding more from me. And he's like, I don't think you realize we have another 7 hours to go, and we only have 1,500 feet to summit. And it was like, what? And I just wanted to kind of backtrack on what the importance is of foundational training, long, boring foundational training, and your advice to the audience, to the many adventurous out there who think they can just muscle up one of these high peaks.
Yeah, I always suggest that people, do a YouTube search on mountain climbers, and you'll come up with, with Will Gadd, who's a world-class ice climber. Of course, people like Reinhold Messner or Alex Honnold or Conrad Anker, and just pause for a minute and just look at their physique. They're not Arnold Schwarzenegger. They're, they're not bodybuilders. They don't have Popeye biceps and forearms. They're typically fairly slight looking people. But what they have is a really strong heart and lungs, cardiovascular. You climb with your legs, but you move your body with your heart and your lungs. So the best way to build a strong cardiovascular system is by doing long, sustained days of physical activity. If you live in the mountains or you have hills, doing, when I say long stamina days, I'm talking 6, 8, 10 hours once a week, and then doing 2, 4, 6 hours 2 more times a week. Now, if that's unpleasant to you, yeah, that's kind of part of the game. Because as exactly the point that you made, Brian, when you're at 21,000 feet on Aconcagua, or you're at, you're crossing Squirrel Hill on Denali, or you're going up the Lhotse face on Everest, those long, slow days are going to pay. That's money in the bank, because that's when your system is going to remember that you have the capacity. I'm a strong believer in the mind-body connection. I'm also a strong believer that we have cellular memory in our cells. And so I'm completely convinced that the more climbing I did, the better I got, because my body said, oh, okay, Alan, you're not just messing with us this time. You're serious. Okay, we better pick up and keep going here and up our game. And so I got stronger as the years went on for two reasons. One, I had the experience, and the second was that my why was so strong. But for people just starting out, don't think that you can go to CrossFit and puke on the workout of the day and do that, and that you're going to be, so strong. Because if it's all about that cardiovascular. Now, if you can work on cardiovascular indoors in the gym, good on you. If you can get on the Stairmaster and do that for 8, 10 hours, good on you. I never could. And so I got bored to death doing indoor workouts. That's the reason I shifted over to real world. And that's part of why I didn't do very well in the beginning of my climbing career, because I was doing everything in the gym. I had a full-time job. I thought I could get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and run 2 miles and call it good. Well, that was necessary, but not sufficient. And later on, I recognized that what I really needed to do was invest in myself by investing in those long, boring, sometimes days in the mountains. But then you come full circle back to being in the moment and getting joy from being in the mountains. We're very lucky, Brian, to live in Colorado, where we just, we've got the Rocky Mountains and, 10, 12, 14,000 foot mountains just a few hours away from our homes, that we can go on a weekend along with, 5,000 other people and go out there and enjoy those days. It's it's not that you have to go and suffer. It's that you have to go and suffer, and you get to enjoy being out in nature.
Yeah, so true. So true. One thing I wanted to touch on is the importance of a coach, and you offer coaching services. You're my coach to climb the 7 summits. And how important is that to someone who's thinking about doing the 7 summits without a coach?
Well, I mean, clearly people can, they don't necessarily need a coach either for physical training or for overall preparation. I think the value that I add to people and what I offer to them is that I'm just a regular guy. I like I said, I worked for Hewlett Packard for 30 years. I had a great career. I did really well in my career, but it was a full-time job, and I had a family, and I was able to integrate climbing into that. And I always viewed my life as an equilateral triangle with, 3 legs, all equal, being my work, my family, and then myself. I always strive to keep it equal, and I always failed, but that was always my goal. So, excuse me. So I think what a coach provides is basically a mirror, is to help you to see yourself, to help you understand what your why is, to help remind you of what that why is. Often people will say, Alan, I need you to hold me accountable. And I kind of go, well, you know what? I can't make you do anything. Nobody can make somebody else do anything. What I can do is give you information, and I can give you suggestions on things that you should do. But at the end of the day, it's just like climbing that mountain. You can be with the best Sherpa in the world, but if you're not prepared, I don't care who you are, you're not going to make that if your legs aren't going to go at the right pace, if you don't have your cardio in line, if you're not paying attention to the basics. So a coach can help you go in fully prepared. I often tell my clients, and this is really, I probably shouldn't say it this way, but I say, my goal is not for you to summit, but I said, my goal is for you to have a positive experience. Obviously, I want every one of my summit coach clients to summit. In fact, I just had 3 summit Everest last week, and I'm so proud of all of them because they put in the work, they put in the preparation, and they went to Everest in what I call Everest shape, which is not only physical, but it's also emotional, mental, and fully with their expectations set. I give people, like I did with you, Brian, on Aconcagua, this document, a tips document, which goes camp by camp, so that when you get to Camp 3, you know exactly what to expect. And again, my goal for you is to have no surprises. And so, and I can just share with you what my experiences were, and hopefully you can learn from the mistakes that I made, and hopefully not repeat some of those same mistakes. But sometimes we learn through making mistakes too.
Absolutely. And going back to Aconcagua with the expedition I went with, we're not going to name names. It was a local guide, and I had spoke with you about that particular company who you knew. They've been around for years, and there's many different expedition companies in the local communities in the Himalayas, in Aconcagua, wherever you go, where you can do these expensive expeditions for a fraction of the price, right? You can
Right.
go up Kilimanjaro for, I don't know, a couple $100 if you find someone local to take you up there. So you're in the best shape. You have the mindset, you have all the gear. How important and crucial is it that you're surrounding yourself with the right professionals to guide you up safely?
There are outstanding local companies. There's outstanding Nepali Sherpa owned and run companies. Likewise, in obviously in Switzerland and in France for Mont Blanc or the Matterhorn or the Eiger, Aconcagua. Beautiful Argentinian guides. Go to the Ecuador volcanoes. There are some world class guides down there that I've climbed with. So you don't have to go with a quote unquote Western guide company to have a great experience. With the way you frame the question, if you're in the right shape, you've got the experience, you know the mountain and the route, then going with a local guide is 100% legit. Where the difference comes in is that often the local guides, they're doing trips, they're doing rounds, and they're going to make the more people they can get up and down the mountain as quickly as possible, the more money they're going to make in what typically is a limited season. So if you look at Denali, if you look at the 6 or 7 companies that are concessioned, if you look at their schedules, you're going to leave on May 12th and you're going to be back on May 28th, and there's zero leeway in that. And that's because they've got somebody else coming on May 29th. And so they need to get you up the mountain and get you off. If you need a couple of extra days, not going to happen. So going with a company that has a little more flexibility, that doesn't have quite the rigorous schedule, those are the ones that will increase your chances of being able to summit rather than just, doing the rounds with them. Also, there are cultural considerations. If you're German and you go climb with an American company, the cultures are not identical. it's not that one is wrong and one is right or better or worse. They're just different, and styles are different. So you need to take that into account. Food is different. Some people love spicy food, some people don't. If you're from China and you come to climb, Mount Baker, you're probably not going to get the same food that you get in China. So it's taking that into account. And as you know, and I know, that food really is one of the biggest elements. And when you climb these mountains, having the right diet. So, it's a complex set of situations that goes into who you choose to climb with. I can really reduce it down, though, to a couple of basic principles. What's the style that you want to climb in? And then what's your budget? And the style comes back to, are you looking for sushi and 4-poster beds at base camp, or are you happy sleeping on the ground? And money. There's a real difference between a $65,000 Everest expedition and a $30,000 Everest expedition.
Yeah,
and it's not just profit.
Yeah, that's what I experienced with the company I went to. With the diminishing returns, it was just myself, and he was picking up 12 people in Mendoza the next day. So to me, and hitting the wall, I think he was just like, hey, I got to get this guy back. He's damaged goods. I got 12 guys in Mendoza. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. You talk a lot in your videos about the evolution of mountaineering, and 20 years ago to where it is today. And you had mentioned, I think 98% of people summit Everest with supplemental oxygen.
Right.
So, I know there's a company that I talked to go back to Aconcagua, and they have a hypoxic tent, head tent for my bedroom for 28 days, to where I'll have this like thing on my head to acclimate, and then they're going to fly me in to Plaza Argentina, right to base camp. So you bypass the whole Hurricane Valley. So it's just interesting, the evolution of mountaineering, how they're kind of like shaving days off expeditions through, I don't want to call it technology, just advancements of, getting people up there. So how has that helped the sport? How has that hindered the sport? I know you're an advocate for, best practices on the mountain, and there's a lot of waste on the mountain, a lot of oxygen tanks on the mountain. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I got to be really careful here not to become, Clint Eastwood, the old man sitting on my front porch. Get off my lawn, kid, because I tend to be a little old school here. I was a real skeptic of the hypoxico tents, altitude tents. Basically, what it is, it's a plastic canopy that goes over your from your chest over your head that you sleep in, and it's in your bed. There's a generator, which can be fairly noisy. Hopefully it's in a room next to you with a tube that comes in, and it reduces the air pressure. It removes oxygen. It's not quite the same as the same physiology that your body will experience being at altitude, but it does simulate that. And your body reacts by creating more red blood cells, which is the net result when you do acclimatization. And the more red blood cells you have in your body, then that allows your heart and lungs to take those red blood cells into your muscles. And of course, that's how we move. And the more red blood cells we have at altitude, the better we perform. So that's the whole basis behind acclimatization. And the theory here is that by pre-acclimatizing at home, you come to the mountain already acclimatized, let's say 17, some companies even claim 23,000 feet. Thus, you can skip the rotations where you're going up, you climb high, sleep low, where you're forcing your body to adapt to the reduced level of oxygen molecules. Now, does it work? I used to think this was black magic science, forget it, hokey pokey. Well, I've had enough Summit Coach clients use it, and they tell me that they're leaving. I had one guy tell me recently he was going over to Broad Peak. Yeah, we spoke the day he was leaving. He goes, Alan, I feel horrible. I haven't had a good night's sleep in 2 months. And so I said, yeah, that's the price you pay, sleeping in a plastic bag, And he says, I know. But then he sent me a WhatsApp from Camp 2 on Broad Peak. He says, I've never felt better. I can't believe it. I'm so acclimatized. I feel great. So there you go. And I have other people that are very analytical. They take daily blood tests. They measure their hematocrit, all this stuff, and they show scientific data that their body is adjusting. Now, here's the rub. Well, let me say one more positive thing, is that Fruitenbach out of Austria, they just did 22 days home to home on Everest. And that included a week being stuck in base camp because of weather. They could have done home to home in probably 15, 16 days. And Lucas is one of the strongest advocates, along with Adrian Bollinger of Alpenglow, for using these tents and doing what are called rapid or flash or speed climbs. Some companies, probably the one that you're talking with, will advertise doing Aconcagua in 10 days instead of the normal, whatever, 2 or 3 weeks. And that's how they market it, and that's how they do it. And they're successful with it. But here's the rub on a big expedition, like a long one, like on Everest, is that you've got people that didn't do it, and you've got people that did use the pre-acclimatization. You get to the mountain at the same time, you're all set to go up, and the weather hits, delays you. Well, 1 week is probably okay, but longer delays are even more common. And so all of a sudden now everybody gets to be at the same level. And now you just spend a month and thousands of extra dollars sleeping in a plastic bag and ruining the relationship with your partner, who's going, why am I sleeping next to you with a lousy generator and you're in a plastic bag and we can't even cuddle, and you're spending all this money and you could have bought me a new car, so there's all the relationship issues. And now you're at the same level as the person that didn't do it. So does it work? Probably. I view it just like I view Diamox, and that is that, there's really no downside to it. But if it works for you, it works for you. But physiology and acclimatization, just like your why, is very unique and personal to each individual human.
Love it. One thing about trust that comes up to me right now through one of your recent videos about stoves going missing at high camps at Everest.
Yeah.
I mean, it just blows me away how thievery on these high peaks it can even exist. Like, people are up there and you're actually messing with people's surviving.
Yeah, there's no excuse for it.
Is there best practice for people to, I don't even know where they can keep their stuff?
Well, Lucas told me that they had their oxygen bottles locked up. A lot of times they'll run, like a bike lock, a bike chain.
Yeah.
They'll run that through all their cylinders. And so somebody has to do is come over with a bolt cutter. Now, why you got a bolt cutter at 26,000 feet?
Unbelievable.
Obviously you have, malicious intent.
Yeah.
Why is there crime around the world? And why should we think that crime doesn't exist in mountaineering? It's the human condition. I think the only way to solve it's not going to be through government passing laws and putting liaison officers and having rangers patrolling the camps. Because just like we don't have enough police to I don't know about you down in Denver, but here in Fort Collins, our traffic is crazy and people are always speeding. There's simply not enough police to enforce even the basic traffic ordinances. Same thing on the mountain. There's no way to enforce it. So the only way to do that is sort of like having a neighborhood watch in your neighborhood, is having a neighborhood watch on the mountain. And the Sherpas and the people that are there all the time, like in Argentina, you've got these local guides that work for Grajos and all these other ones. They're up there every day during the season. They know who's there. They know who's not. They know who looks suspicious. They know the bad actors in other guide companies. And so it becomes a community self-policing. I believe that's the solution to it. It's not going to come from passing laws. It's not going to come from governments issuing press releases. We see that happen all the time. And that's, to coin the phrase, that's fake news. That just is not going to happen. That's not going to change anything at all. But if the community takes it upon themselves, it's just like leaving no trace principles. Using wag bags in the mountains and not leaving trash there. Mm-hmm. It's up to each individual operator to take the leadership And then it's up to each individual member or client or customer to show personal responsibility and integrity in order to protect the mountain and also, to some cases, to protect the community from itself.
Love it. Integrity, that just hit me. So just keep doing what you're doing, because I love the advocacy. I love you sharing, because people don't know about what's going on up at these high peaks without your voice or people like you. So thank you for continuing what you do. And before we wrap up, Alan, could you let our listeners know where they can find you? Are there any websites, social media handles, or other platforms where they can connect with you and learn more about your work?
Sure. And again, Brian, thank you for this opportunity. It's been a great conversation, and I've really enjoyed the topics. I'm there's, I suffer from TMI out there in the public media. I started my website back in 1999 because I didn't want to have an email that said Alan Arnette at Yahoo. I thought that was stupid. So I was telling somebody about it, and he said, well, you should get your own domain name. I said, well, what's that? You go, oh, yeah, you can buy your own domain. So I bought alanarnette.com, and that's where my main site is. And I have a blog that all the links are off of that. So you can find Summit Coach off of that, Summit Talk, where I do my public speaking, and then you can see the blog and where I cover, the Everest season, the climbing, and everything else. And then on social media, yeah, I'm on all the usual suspects except for TikTok. So on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so YouTube. I just like you, I started this podcast a few years ago, which has been a lot of fun, where I just get on a yak for a while and I interview people from time to time, and it's actually been a lot of fun. So I'm getting really good feedback on it. I only get a handful of unlikes, and I'm always trying to figure out who is that and what I say. Yeah. They don't love me. What I do?
The haters. You got the haters. Well, thanks a lot for being here, Alan. It's always a pleasure to hear your stories and your sage wisdom. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our second episode of After the Peaks, and I just wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to Alan for sharing his valuable insights and experiences with us today. Until next time, keep spreading positivity, making a difference, and embracing the extraordinary in your own lives. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode of After the Peaks. Thanks a lot, Alan.
Oh man, yeah, no, thanks for having me on the second episode. This is really
number two. Yeah. You were going to be number one, but I needed to have some margin of error there to have my buddy come on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit stop. You might get something on your computer saying wait for upload or something like that. That's just getting the video into the cloud, and I'll make sure I'll upload it and edit it and make sure it looks all pretty for post. My video died on the first camera about halfway through. I didn't have my infinity battery, so this is just tech stuff I'm dealing with here. But we'll have the audio track, and we can kind of go back through the beginning, and I'll have some clips and stuff up on Instagram and stuff. But we'll have the audio track the whole way through.
All right, sounds good, man. Yeah, and if you need any specific pictures or something, I've got 50,000 images, so I'm glad to send you a few.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll update you on my Mount Hood expedition. I'm excited about that and scared at the same time because they told me to get a second ice axe.
Good thinking. And just remember, never be unroped or unclipped.
Yeah, they're not doing ropes.
Ah! What? Wow. Okay.
I went with Timberline guides, and I went to snow school, and we got weathered out. But this vet expedition, they're not doing it.
Wow, that's unusual. Yeah, because when we climbed it, it was just me and two buddies, and we went roped up, and one of my buddies going up that the last little part by the where the sulfur is near the summit. He slipped and fell, and I was able to arrest his fall with the rope. Otherwise, he would have tumbled down, and I don't know if he would have gotten hurt or not, but he would have definitely messed up his hair.
Did you guys go up the Pearly Gates or the Old Man Chute?
We did the Pearly Gates.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to reach out to him, and it concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, also, I don't know what these vets, how much experience they have, but if they don't have experience in, crampons and footwork, I mean, you know how you can get, tumbled up on your own feet.
Yeah. I'm going to do some investigating on this. So,
Yeah.
to be continued.
All right, man. Be in the moment.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Alan. Take care.
Bye.